We're about to get this party started. We're just letting everybody in from the waiting room. Welcome to a very exciting SEO conversation for today. So we are cognizant that having a technical SEO conversation might not be like the most fun thing you are going to do today, but turns out it is going to be the most fun thing you do today. So get excited. Welcome everybody in, and one, to just make sure I didn't screw up the technology on this webinar, feel free to give a quick intro of who you are, what your company is, and we're gonna get started here in just 1 minute, but we still got a couple people joining, so we're just gonna give her a second. But take a second in the chat, introduce yourself and your company, what you do, and I don't know, whatever else you want to share with everybody. Maybe you like long walks on the beach or reviewing technical SEO audits, who knows? So yeah, I'm gonna go first. I'm gonna go, hi, I'm Natalie from Volume 9. We do digital marketing. Okay. So feel free, introduce yourself, tell us who you are. We're excited to meet you. And if you've been in our webinars before, you know that we're real big fans of participation, so don't be shy. Throughout the presentation, please feel free to send in a Q&A or a chat. We will stay on as long as we have questions. And we love energy and chats from the audience. So feel free to send a chat in, introduce yourself, and also send Q&As in. And in about 30 seconds here, we're going to call it good on all these people entering our waiting room, and we're going to get going. And gosh, my chat is looking, there we go. I got to move my chat off to the side. It was like, I can't really read it. It's just showing like one word at a time. Okay. Just really quick. Welcome, everybody who said in chat. We'd love for you to introduce yourself in the chat. Hey, Kevin, nice to meet you. And ooh, exciting. You're launching a remote business operations venture. That sounds awesome. Thanks for joining us. Hey, Liza. Oh, yay. Thanks for saying that Volume 9 is the best digital marketing agency ever. You're the best. Welcome, Danielle. Good intents, reimagining the future of camping. That's awesome. And I love that extra word comfortable in there. Because my husband's an Eagle Scout, so him and I have different views of camping. His is a little more rustic than mine. So Sophia, welcome. Ecom wellness business. Awesome. This will be a great presentation for you. We're going to talk about some e-commerce stuff here for sure. All right. Sri, hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Love that you're pivoting into digital marketing. Feel free to ask all the questions you want. Love to hear that. Andre, welcome. Julianne, Eileen, I'm so sorry too if I like mispronounce everybody's names. I'm going to go for it. Brandon, welcome. Thank you guys, everybody. Love that you're here. Throughout the session today, we love getting input and chats from the crowd. Oh, Sophia, I'm excited that you're excited. You're going to have a great day today. This is the best part of the day, is SEO stuff. So, okay. All right, everybody continue to introduce yourself, but we're going to get going. I'm going to do a quick introduction, and then I'm going to hand it over to Richard to do a quick introduction. So my name is Natalie Henley. I own and run Volume 9. We are a digital marketing agency here in Denver. And SEO is, I would call our bread and butter. It's one of the main things that we do for clients. And we've done a whole lot of website launches. And by we, I really mean Richard over here has done a whole lot of website launches.
Indeed, yes. Good morning, Richard Lesher, VP of Operations at Volume 9. And to Natalie's point, I've been doing SEO now for 13 years. So a lot of website launches. I'd say probably hundreds is fair. But yeah, nice to meet all of you.
Sweet. All right. So as we get going, one of the things that's really helpful in a presentation like this is kind of understanding everybody's SEO level. So I should have pre-created this poll. I'm gonna ask a quick question here. If everybody could take a second on your comfort level with SEO. And the reason why we like to ask this question is so that we make sure that we don't miss anybody when we're talking. So I'm gonna just really quick, I'm gonna say totally new. I know a little bit, enough to be dangerous. So sorry. Now I should have pre-done this. So sorry for the misspellings. They're about to go out. I'm pretty good. Very strong. Okay. All right. And then SEO, save, save. Save as a webinar poll. Okay, now can I push this poll? So I'm going to throw out a poll here. If everybody could just let us know what your comfort level is with SEO, so that if we, start talking about page titles, if we got to take a minute and explain what that is, or if that's something everybody knows, we're just kind of getting a sense of where everybody's comfort level at. There's really no wrong answer. We just want to make sure that we catch everybody. As you're filling in this poll, I also really want to encourage you for the next hour, well, now down to 43 minutes, fire us as your speakers, hire us as your consultants. And what I mean by that is that if you are learning about SEO or you're really about to go through a launch or you're right in the middle of a process, there is no way that Richard and I were going to anticipate every situation you could have been in. Hey, I've got a Shopify site. I'm launching a Squarespace. Oh, I'm switching from a .net to a .com. Oh, we're moving our blog to a subdomain. It's really hard. We have seen, I don't know that I want to say we've seen it all, but my goodness, we've seen a lot. So the chances are what you're up against, we have seen, we can help talk you through, but there was just no way we were going to predict every single iteration of a website launch. So we tried to cover the big stuff here, but if you've got specific questions or you want to dig in, or if we hit on a topic and you're like, oh my gosh, tell me more about these canonicals you speak of. Please, take advantage of the time here and don't feel shy to ask. And if you're thinking it, someone else probably is too. Even if you're like, what did you mean by schema? And we might go, oh shoot, we did glaze over that. Let's get a little more detailed. So please ask if you got it. Okay. All right. We're going to call that good on the poll. And based on where we're at, it looks like we are kind of intermediate. So we've got a handful of people that are totally new. So as we're going through, we will try to explain stuff. But if you're brand new to SEO and we've lost you, please send us questions and also know we're available at the end of the call. And it looks like a lot of us are in that little bit enough to be dangerous. So we're going to kind of speak at that level. And then for the one of you that said very strong, high five, welcome. Feel free to just, I don't know, vent SEO stuff with us because you're gonna catch that once you get to this very strong, a lot of this is just sarcastic venting on how needlessly difficult Google makes it to relaunch a website. And how annoying it is that we even have to put a presentation like this together because Google hates relaunches. So, okay. All right. With that, let's get this party started with this short 200 slide presentation. Just kidding. It's not that many. We just, 2 million. Is that too fair? Okay, here we go. All right, let me get that. Share screen 1. Okay, here we go. All right. So let's talk about SEO during a website launch. And I use the word protecting, and that is a big thing we're going to be talking about. When you are relaunching a website or going through a process of building a new site, this is not an exercise of, man, how do we relaunch the site and then immediately triple our traffic? It's about protection and how do we protect your SEO? And I'll explain why in a minute. But first, a couple things, because we always get this question early on. Yes, we are going to send a recording out and a copy of these slides after this call. As long as you were registered for the webinar, you didn't even have to be here, although we love that you're here because we want you to ask us questions. And it's more fun than Richard and I presenting to ourselves and to the V9 team. So thanks everybody for coming. We will send out a recording and a copy of the slides, so you do not have to take copious notes. We will make sure you get a copy. Second, and I mentioned this one already, it is virtually impossible for us to predict every situation you might be in. Your CMS, how long you have to launch your website, a consolidation of a domain. So as we go through this, please don't be shy. Ask us questions. Get what you need out of this presentation. We are here as a resource for you. Okay. So I got a couple slides about volume 9. I'm not going to spend too much time here other than to note that we have been at this for quite some time. For almost 20 years, we've been helping companies here in Denver and across the US and a few even internationally And as an agency, we focus on growing brands organically. So it's not that we're anti-ads or that we don't even help clients out with things like ads, but at the core of it, we want to help companies build strong, authentic brands that do a great job telling your story, connecting with your audience, and just growing a brand asset online. So that's what we help. So SEO is a big part of that for us, and we've had the opportunity to help a ton of brands do that. And this what we're presenting on today, a website launch, has been one of the main projects we've worked on for the last decade. It is our top way that we get new accounts. It's one of the most common things we help clients through. This is, when I think about the stuff that we do day in and day out, helping protect SEO through a website launch, this is what we're at day in and day out. And here's why. One, Google hates it when you relaunch your website without SEO best practices. So this is a screenshot from a major e-commerce brand that brought us on. They went from about 4 million users to 2 million after a relaunch. As you can imagine, that represented millions in lost revenue for them. You can kind of just see the slow tank of they didn't do some things right. And we could, the one person on here that knows a lot about SEO, they rel canonical to 404 pages. So some fun stories in that one. But they just were consistently losing money and revenue from organic traffic, all tied to a relaunch. And great stories, they brought us in and we were able to start bringing it back pretty quickly. But you can kind of see this V that they had in their data, and that V was just millions in dollars in revenue that they never got back. And it was all around SEO best practices and just making sure, and they just didn't do a great job protecting that SEO through the launch. And then here's the second one. And actually, we actually got a confirmation from Google this year. Not that they wanted to confirm it, but there was a bunch of stuff launched about Google and metrics they use for rankings. And one of the things they confirmed is that they sandbox new sites, which means that when you launch a new website, it's really hard to get it ranked. Even if you do a lot of stuff right. So this is an example. This is a screenshot from an e-commerce client of ours that we just started with, but they launched earlier this year, and they couldn't get their content indexed, let alone starting to get traffic to the site. And we've just really, as they started with us, we started working with them to help get this content indexed. But this is a brand new site that's been live for 6+ months with product pages, unique content, all that stuff that Google's not even indexing, let alone ranking and driving traffic to. And the summary is that Google's real fussy about website launches and SEO. And so the whole point of this presentation is to help you navigate Google's fussiness. And this is why we are not talking about how to triple your traffic when you relaunch the website. It's that more and more we see when clients relaunch websites, this is the number one cause of a massive ranking decline. And if you don't work SEO best practices into a new site, whether it's a relaunch or a brand new site, it makes it infinitely more difficult to drive organic traffic to the website. So that is why we are talking today. And then as you are asking, we're going to try and talk about, we're going to try and get questions answered. If you could just throw them into the chat or the Q&A, we'll try and keep track of it. Richard, as I'm talking, if you'll keep track of it, and then I will switch gears and I'll keep track of it while you're talking. But really quick, we had a question on what is sandboxing. So let me go back to that slide. Great question. Sandboxing means that Google doesn't trust your website and they won't index your content. It's this policy that they have on brand new websites where it's a new site. They don't know if you're trustworthy or not. They don't know if you're going to add content. They don't know if you're going to get links or you're a real brand. And so they're really uninclined to give you indexation, which means they don't even want to put you anywhere in the Google search, even if it's number 100 for your keyword, let alone rank you in traffic driving positions where you could actually get meaningful traffic to the site. So sandboxing means that even though you've built a website and you've submitted it to search engines and you've done all the things and it's great, unique, crawlable content, doesn't mean that Google's going to necessarily index it. And if it's a brand new site on a brand new domain, they're really uninclined to do that. Great question. Richard, were there any other big questions that came through that section?
Are landing pages treated differently? And I'll say yes. So a landing page on an existing site can get indexed quickly. It doesn't essentially go to a sandbox. One of the things we did learn this year, though, is that it launches essentially with the value of your homepage. Your homepage is the most valuable page from Google's perspective. Of course, most users are going to start on your homepage, so landing pages do start essentially scored the way your homepage would be scored from Google's perspective, but there isn't a waiting period per se. Once Google finds it, it can be indexed and doesn't show up in a sandbox over the course of a month like a brand new site might.
Great question.
And Sophia, needing more sales is SEO to drive traffic and eventually conversions. You're darn tootin'. That is what we do. Yeah.
Yeah, don't do this
You're
if
in
you
the
don't
right
care about
place.
revenue. Like this is the SEO is annoying and mind numbing. So if it doesn't impact your bottom line, I wouldn't. So SEO is an acronym for search engine optimization. And what we are talking about is, so like I'll just give a really simple example. Like let's say I had a bouncy house business here in Denver, and I wanted to rent bouncy houses. Um, certainly if I was Natalie's bouncy houses, if somebody searched Natalie's bouncy houses, they'd find my website. But what I also want is I just want people searching bouncy houses in Denver. And the idea is that they search for that keyword, they find my website, they're at my bouncy house. So that's what we're talking there. It's just the art of figuring out what your user is looking for and making sure you're connecting with them. And then in a website launch, generally what we find is so there's usually two major situations. There's either a relaunch, like, hey, we're on WooCommerce and now we're switching to Shopify. Or hey, we were .net and now we want to be .com. So it's a hey, we're making a big change to the website, or we're changing the platform, or we're updating the design and the URLs, and we're going through a rebrand process. So there's usually that process, or there's the process of like, hey, I'm a brand new startup and I want to create a new site. And both have challenges. And both, if you don't work SEO best practices into it, on the first one, you can stand to lose. So, like, let's say I was ranking really well for Bouncy Houses Denver and I relaunched the website, I stand to lose all that traffic in that ranking. And then let's say I'm building a brand new website. If I don't build SEO best practices in to the site design and how it works, it's a lot harder to go back and fix it once the site is live versus fixing it before the site gets up.
And lots of questions. Why are they uninclined to index the site immediately? Does Google want you to throw more money at paid strategies versus SEO? The answer, if we like the rosy colored answer, is they want to protect search from anyone who can stand up a website, not send users to bad websites. The probably more honest is yes, they want ads. They want to make more money off of you. And then, does the type of website matter to Google? We're not in retail or selling products. We're more of a services company. It doesn't matter as it relates to indexation. When you think of SEO or competition, it really is you're competing in a separate space. Where e-coms are going to be more transactional searches, purchases, your services are going to be more informational, educational type sites. So you'll get different search results based on the site, but Google doesn't inherently like one site more than another or one type of site more than another.
I will say
Um,
too, I've noticed, and I don't know if you've seen this too, Richard, a lot that Google's going a lot slower at indexing content than it once did. And I think that is directly related to how much AI content is gunking up the index. And they're
yeah.
just one, their crawl budget is just, it's enormous and it's growing precipitously. So they don't want to crawl it unless they feel like it's valuable. And then they also really want to make sure that you're not developing and producing a bunch of basically duplicated AI content, because they don't want any more of that gunking up their index.
Yeah. And favorite question, how long does it usually take for Google to start indexing? It's my favorite question because it's my favorite digital marketing answer, which is it depends. So to your point, Natalie, some sites are crawled much more frequently. Like the Washington Post gets crawled constantly for new content, naturally, because their content is going to be very timely. Where a small site that's been around for 6 months and posted a new blog, it might take a couple weeks for that content to be discovered. So it will depend on the size of the site and how frequently you update content on that site.
Yeah, and Richard, do you have a good rule of thumb? Like, let's say it's a brand new services business. They got 10 services pages that they're launching with. They're trying to get their content indexed. Like, what kinds of things would you be thinking about to get that site indexed and getting traffic going to it?
Yeah, so this will get a little bit nerdy, but some of the things that are less nerdy will be shared on social media, shared in an email newsletter, right? The more places where essentially this content is discoverable in a crawl, because Google doesn't crawl a straight line. It's not a linear crawl, right? It's clicking links and jumping across the web. So if you link out to someone, it's going to go to that site and then crawl a couple pages off of that site, maybe come back. So sharing the content widely can help with indexation rate. And then social signals we know matter. So sharing it on social will certainly help redirect essentially the crawler back to the site. On a more nerdy perspective, make a sitemap, submit that to Google, and keep that updated.
Awesome. All right. We're going to keep rolling here because I want to get to a little more of the content and then we'll pause again. We'll kind of at the end of each section take down questions too. And again, we'll stay as long as there's questions. So, and thank you for keeping them coming. We love it. All right. So this is a question we get a lot, which is okay, when do we fit SEO into the process? So this is just sort of a standard, this is, this is the summarized standard process, whether it's a brand new site or a revamp. This tends to be sort of the general steps you go through to get from here to there on a new website. So here's some of the best places to get SEO in. This is a common one. It's okay, but not great, which is, hey, we have a dev site and we need to get SEO eyes on it before we launch this sucker. Having an SEO resource or just taking the time to do an SEO crawl. And we'll mention this throughout two different tools we like, but if you're going to do your own crawl, one of the tools that we really like is Sitebulb. It's pretty cost effective if you're adept at SEO. If you're not crazy adept at SEO, another tool that we like is SEMrush. We'll have a crawl that you can run. But you want to do a crawl and understand like the technical engine behind your site, ideally before it launches, and you want to fix some bigger things. And those tools will come up, and we'll let Richard here in a minute kind of go through all the technical stuff that these tools will come up with. But you might see things like site speed, or you might get a like Sitebulb will do a good job talking to you about the mobile friendliness of the site. So it's an okay time to add an SEO into the process is once you have a dev site. Better is letting your SEO give input on wireframes and design, not because search engine optimization experts are really good at colors and logos, but because designers have this bad habit of making websites fancy and harming your SEO. There was a tactic a few years ago where designers stopped using navigation because it just cluttered up the page. Just all this useless navigation. We want to make it more experiential. Stuff like that can really harm your website. I don't know, Richard, do you have a good one that designers do in this process that kills your SEO?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing at this stage is that design is often done uh, prior to understanding functionality, right? Exactly how it's going to work. And that can impact how the site is crawled. So you get these very pretty designs, or you get these very pretty things that, look awesome. But then when you get to functionality, you can find that you can't actually crawl some of this. Some of the pretty can't actually be seen. So really trying to isolate the design with the proposed functionality is super important here. Just the discoverability of content is contingent upon Google's ability to find it. And a lot of times at this stage, those designs don't consider that.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm keeping up with everybody. Somebody rose their hand, but now I'm having trouble figure out. Okay, if you're the person that rose your hand, feel free to like send a chat in or send in a question on the Q&A. Okay, all right. So then this is our ideal case scenario, is if you have a SEO company that's helping you, or you're going to start thinking about SEO, it starts all the way at the beginning. And we'll kind of talk about each of these stages and great things to do during the scoping section, before, during, and after a launch. But the best case scenario is that you actually get someone with a bit of an SEO background involved in helping you select your web firm and your RFP. That's going to set you up the best for success during the process. And then a couple more places that people tend to add in SEO is this is a really common one for us. Like, oh, our SEO we launched, we destroyed our SEO and we got to fix it. So you know, absolutely SEOs can come in and help this. This is not ideal. This is usually expensive and you've lost traffic. And then finally, this is one that we've seen before where somebody's come back after like a year. They're like, SEO wasn't the priority. We lost all of our traffic, but now SEO is a priority again. Can we get that traffic back? Like, sure, but not by going back and now fixing your redirects a year later. Like, there is a deprecating amount of time before Google just stops forgiving you of your SEO sins for your relaunch, and it is what it is. And that's why it's really important. If you relaunch a site and you notice that it tanks, you've got a short window to get it fixed. There's not great definition of how short that window is, but we're talking months, not years, to get that addressed. With our clients, we tend to have a week of launch procedure to try and get as much of that done within a week or two. So but those are some common places to put SEO in. All right. So let's get to the guts of this. And I am going to hand this over to Richard to keep us super entertained as we talk through our launch support checklist. And fun fact, I made these slides, but they're all based on like Richard's checklist. But it'll be fun for Richard to experience and present these live of how I organize this for him. So,
Yeah. We also didn't discuss who was presenting which slides, so brace yourselves. Brace yourselves for greatness. Um, all right. So we do have a launch support template that'll be available and also noted in the chat that the links to the tools that were mentioned earlier are at the end of these slides that we'll share.
and then I'm going to put this link in really quick in the chat, but we will also send out these slides. But our checklist is available to download on our website if you would like it. And then I loved this, Jeff, of this little girl opening up this box, but the cat had already climbed out. So anyways, okay.
All right. So then as you think about the scope of a website launch and really trying to wrap your head around what should be included, regardless of who you're talking to, there's really the basics of SEO or, what have become the basics of SEO, where 10 years ago they were magical, mythical things that we didn't talk about because they worked because no one else was doing them. But optimizing things like page titles, meta descriptions, H1s, your basics to telling Google what each page is about on your site. Considering a blog or resource section, this often gets overlooked as part of even going back to the design process, that when you launch a site, you should never anticipate it being static. You should build a site with the anticipation that it is going to grow, it is going to get bigger, you are going to produce more content. So whether you call it a blog, resources, articles, whatever it may be, that can just be a great place to add new content without feeling like you have to rethink your entire website every time. And then easily the most important thing as part of relaunching a site is 301 redirect mapping. And that is, in its simplest form, it is a change of address form. It is telling Google or anyone that's trying to get to your site, this is where it used to be, but it's moved addresses, so forward any mail/visits to this new location. When we talk about preserving the organic traffic to a website through a relaunch, that is the most important step. So you want to make sure that that's there. Considering some of the bigger items like site speed, and I say bigger in that it's usually high level of effort, that, the trying to get the site to be faster or trying to get it to meet all of Google's expectations from how your site should be performing can often be a big undertaking from a development perspective. So you definitely want to make sure you're considering it as part of this process, and looking at plugins, site security, right? How can we make the site the best it can possibly be from Google's perspective, from search perspective, and from users' perspective? And then troubleshooting and fixes. Your site will not be perfect when you relaunch it. It's pretty much guaranteed something happens, something's not exactly the way you wanted it. So creating time the week that you launch a site to look at it and make sure everything's in good shape is important. All right. So before you sign the contract, I'm really familiar with these slides. Considering your content strategy, so one of the things that often happens when you're thinking about a new website is new look, new words, right? How can we incorporate some more content? Maybe we want to change content. Maybe we don't like the messaging of the current site that we want to overseas. So identifying a key stakeholder in the content strategy is really helpful. Accounting for multiple weeks, ideally, for what we would call a development site review. So that's once the site gets stood up and it's functional, but it's hidden, right? For the sake of review, ideally leaving as much time between a full review of that development site from an SEO perspective and the actual launch is ideal. Just because we can find things that have a high level of effort to try to fix prior to launch. And you don't want that to be the reason why you're feeling like you have to push out a launch date. So leaving time to do a full check of the website prior to launching can help you avoid a lot of potentially really costly errors. And this is one we see a lot more, but custom CMSs. So I saw a few people in the chat who noted that they're actually actively looking at launching a new website. And custom CMSs they can be great. But generally speaking, unless there is a compelling technological need to not use a WordPress, a HubSpot, a Shopify, and that would be something like there's this really complicated technological integration with these third-party tools that allow me to collect all this additional information, and the only way we can code it is by building a custom CMS. Um, you know, there really isn't that strong of a case. Every single tool has its quirks and problems, but a custom CMS will as well, and usually and then some. So trusting the experts, the WordPress, the Shopify's, the BigCommerce, 99.9% of the time will do what you want it to do, and save you the extensive cost that generally comes with a custom CMS as well. And then asking about SEO background, I think this shows up a lot where, when you're looking across service lines, right? A designer is working with a developer wants to have an SEO support, so they're hiring in someone to help with SEO. Really checking out the background, how long they've been doing it, what experience they have. Not necessarily because that makes them better at writing page titles, but to Natalie's point, the more you've seen, the more you can prepare for, the more you can anticipate through that process. So having a solid background can really help. If anything, I joke during a website launch that we serve as therapists part of the time to tell people things are going to be okay. We've seen this before. We know how to fix it, which can go a long way in this process.
And I really, I think more and more we're seeing developers who they're like, yeah, we do SEO. What they mean is they're gonna do some page titles, or they view like SEO as like this moment in time where you blow SEO confetti on the site and check mark, it's done. And that's not quite how you want to view it. Okay, great question, Richard. How does coding a website from scratch using like HTML and CSS and JavaScript compare to using a content management system like WordPress? So like the question is like so for the kind of the more beginners on the call, there's these systems called content management systems that make it a lot easier to build a website. So like a really popular one everyone's heard about is WordPress. Another one is Shopify. Squarespace is another popular, and these are all like systems to make it easy. Versus I'm gonna open up a ye old text editor and I'm gonna start building myself a site.
Yeah, I think if you're comfortable building your own site and you're coding it yourself, that's a different situation. If a developer comes to you and wants to code it from scratch, the thing you should keep in mind is how difficult it will be to make updates on your own. The nice thing about a CMS like a WordPress or a Shopify is, you want to change the price of a product or you found a typo. The idea behind a CMS is to take these complex folder structures and files and source code and make it so that you can go in and find the box where that word is and change it. And with a custom CMS or a custom build from scratch, unless you feel really comfortable with coding, and you're the one making the changes to the website, it can be really difficult to keep your own site updated. And so the CMSs are built to be user facing, user friendly, so that as an owner of a business, you can go into Shopify, you can pull your revenue reports, and you can update that a product is out of stock without having to know how to code inherently.
Great question.
Okay, and then during the process of redesigning a site, and this all really goes to how easy is the content to find? If we think about search engines as question and answering services, people have questions, we provide answers. When you think about your website, how easy is that answer to find? Is it text, meaning Google can read it, as opposed to heavy on imagery and videos, having some text or supporting text for videos and imagery? How easy can we make clear to Google, this is the answer to this question, in that design process where we're considering how that content is structured, how directly it answers questions for the end user. So all of that goes into making sure that Google is happy with the new site, whether it's the technical side or even just the crawlability of content or the ability of a search engine to see content on the page.
Yeah, and I think when during this process, like the words we hate hearing the most are like words like clean, simple, streamlined. Those are
Like
usually
Apple. That's my favorite, is I
that's
want to
it.
make my website like Apple. It's like, well, you're not Apple. So it's different for, you're setting up a brand new website and you want people to find it. People know Apple. People know how to find it. They don't need a navigation with 100 links in it, but you might. That might be the right thing for you to be able to compete in a different space. Okay. And then thinking about that pre-launch. So this is getting ahead of problems and assessing risk, right? So when we think of what could go wrong with a launch, prepping a week to 3 weeks, ideally even 4 weeks, right? As far as you can get ahead of it, this is looking for common issues, common things that are going to make it difficult for your site to appear in search. Some of these get pretty nerdy, but it's really, again, checking those boxes on best practices and being able to say, you know what, we're looking ahead to the problems, and if we're making significant changes to the website, we're assessing the risk of those changes and coming up with solutions to try to mitigate any risks that may come with it. A good example is, um, you know, redoing your entire navigation, right? That generally has a big risk to it because you're not just changing the address of everything, you're changing how you get to that address. You're essentially providing completely new directions to that address. So assessing that risk, understanding the risk, and making those updates to those best practices to just try to, again, mitigate it. And then the common things that get ahead of it a little bit, but we'll talk a little bit about common mistakes, but thinking through the simple stuff, your analytics, making sure that you're still able to track the new site. You want to verify that prior to launch so that when it does launch, you don't lose any data along the way.
And then I would asterisk because I just think about like where things have gone really wrong on this list. Um, that full backup is so critical. Because I cannot tell you how many times we've had developers like, oh yeah, we got it, we're moving it, and then all the page titles are wrong, or it's some weird 6-year-old version of page titles. So just getting a backup of all your current URLs and metadata so you've got it, and then those existing redirects. Because it can cause some big problems if you have weird stuff in your HC access file and now we loop more things on top of it. It can start to create some big errors. So just getting the list of kind of where things were at can just really help if you're in a troubleshooting situation post-launch.
And then day of launch, again, this is really understanding that your website won't be perfect. I guess it could be. I've never seen one that was perfect at launch, so maybe I'm overstating it. Maybe someone
Oh
has,
my God.
but
When we were talking about this, Richard was like, he's like, I have yet to see someone set up Analytics 4 properly. Like since Analytics 4 has launched, we have yet to see someone actually set it up properly on a new launch or a relaunch.
yeah. And I think when you're looking at a launch, these are always timeline based. You always have an idea as to when you anticipate your website launching. And there's certain things that we call showstoppers, right? That we would say, no, you can't launch on this date because you have things that are fundamentally going to cause harm if you launch a site. Then there are other things that the day of launch also helps say, okay, let's prioritize what's left. Let's prioritize the things that we weren't able to get done prior to launching the site, as well as looking for those things that every developer will tell you that they take the no index tag off, which is a tag that tells Google take me out of the index. I don't want anyone to know I exist on Google. Um, but I would say 1 out of 5 launches with a no index tag on it. So day of launch is, looking for these big items that potentially will hurt organic traffic right out of the gate, but then also starting that process of prioritizing what's next, what's left over, what couldn't we get done prior to the deadline to launch the site. And things like pausing paid traffic sources, making sure the dev site isn't still live, that happens way more often. So your dev site lives somewhere else on a different domain. Leaving that live and launching the new site and not getting rid of the dev site, that's probably 3 out of 5 times. And when that gets indexed, you essentially have 2 sites that are exactly the same that you're sending to Google. So those are the types of things that can be really detrimental in this process that you want to get ahead of and then verify when the site goes live.
Perfect. And then I got a couple quick questions here. Okay, so there is as you're going through it, I think what we've got a couple people that are hoping as you give your comments about these checklists, one that you could also comment about if it's a brand new site versus a relaunch. So like brand new baby branded site. And then also we have someone who's going hunk by hunk, page by page versus one big launch at a time. So
Yeah.
things to be thinking about as you're doing it bit by bit, and also if it's a brand new site.
Yeah, Paul, I like the way you phrase that question. But yeah, so for a brand new site, don't think of this as losing, think of it as opportunities, right? So one of the things that a website relaunch does for you is it provides an opportunity for you to do things that are harder to do on an existing site. So if you don't have traffic today, or your site's not doing big numbers, so you don't have this concern about losing traffic, these same checklists, these same things that we're looking for go to how to get more traffic for a brand new site, right? Because you're still doing these best practices. You're still making sure that Google's happy with the site. You're still making smart decisions about your content and the organization of the content. Those are all things that go to what is a standard SEO program or approach. So doing these things with the website launch, yes, it doesn't necessarily, you're not losing sleep over losing the traffic you currently have, it sounds like. So it really goes to how do I create the best possible experience, not just for users, but for search engines to, create unmitigated success moving forward.
Oh, that's great. Unmitigated success. I'm gonna remember that as
Yeah.
a
So,
I'll also throw in too, when I think about, okay, brand new site and kind of how some of this applies with this drip process. So when you're going on a URL by URL basis, so Paul, when you have virtually none and you're trying to grow up and get more and more traffic, that almost certainly is going to be adding new content to the site. And so you can think about this procedure. And then Gabby, that's kind of what you're doing too, right? Either it's a new content or maybe you're changing URL, kind of whatever that process is looking like for you. So one, you want to, the big thing for you is the first thing is you want to make sure Google can see it. So is it getting indexed? So you can do things like submit it. You can either make sure that your sitemap is up to date and that your sitemap is submitted in Google Search Console, or you can actually go in and submit a specific URL to kind of pay attention to it. And then you want to do that same thing. Like you want to have page titles and meta descriptions on your page. You want to make sure there's text and it's crawlable. You want to make sure the page is quick. All of those things to make sure that Google's going to like your page. And then I don't have it written here, but you also want to make sure you don't write that page with fully AI because Google's going to be less inclined to index it because unless it's got something unique on it. And Google's official policy on AI isn't that they're anti-AI content, but they don't want regurgitated AI content, which means that it has to have value or have some uniqueness to it. So when you're creating a page too, you also want to have that uniqueness factor.
yeah. And to the second question, it looks like it broke out a little bit. So as you're redesigning a website page by page or section by section, these rules all still stay the same. You just have to apply them, frankly, more frequently. That depending on the process that you're going through to say you're staging or bootstrapping the development for this section and you're launching it all at once, that would still go through this process of make sure that you're taking off no index tags, make sure that you're accounting for crawlability of content, design. If you're going page by page and, legitimately, I worked on a project where the site was close to 2 million pages and they redesigned the whole thing through A/B testing. They ran A/B testing, decided we're changing the color of this button. So they would go page by page, section by section, changing silos of pages or sections of pages. And to the question of if you make changes at that level, if you just change a page and you're basically redesigning that single page on your site, you don't have to resubmit that to Google. Google is actively crawling your site. They will see those changes. And as you spread those out, they'll continue to discover them. There isn't an additional action you'll need to take for Google to be able to see the new experience. They'll see it upon the next visit to the site. It's much riskier to launch the whole website than it is going page by page, but it's also, I think you'll probably feel it depending again on how big your site is. It can be tedious to go page by page. So a lot of times a clean start feels better part of that process, but page by page, you don't necessarily introduce any inherent risks with that compared to a complete relaunch, but you do want to consider these best practices as you continue moving through it.
And then one more quick question in here. Is it okay to have your dev site on a subdomain, or does it need to be on a completely separate domain?
So you absolutely can use a subdomain. The important thing is that you add that no index tag to it. And a lot, if you're using a canned CMS, a lot of times it's just checking a box that you don't want to send it to a search engine, regardless of where it lives. I've seen staging environments in a subfolder, so blank.com/development site. As long as you put a no index on it, it can live anywhere. And in a lot of cases, especially when you're looking at performance, it actually is helpful to use a subdomain for your development site because you can get a true read because you're using your hosting, your actual live environment as to how the site performs. Whereas if you put it on a completely separate site that uses different hosting than your site, it can give you some different data, but it's 100% okay to put it on a subdomain.
Awesome. Okay, and then Brandon, I promise I see your question. That is a great question. I'm just gonna kind of hold it to the end. I've got a couple bigger questions I think are just gonna be great at the end to kind of like more like philosophical and hold and like when to know and all that stuff. So we will get to it. So I'm not ignoring your question. Just know we're gonna get to it here.
Cool. And then post-launch, so this is tell us what we didn't see, right? Let's look at the performance. Let's make sure we're seeing, if we made changes and we assessed the risk or calculated the risk of potential losses or issues with the site, is that what we're seeing afterwards? Are we seeing bigger drops in keyword rankings or traffic than we anticipated? Are we seeing gains that maybe we didn't anticipate with a new website? This is get a read of the site 4 weeks after. The reason why it's 4 weeks after is because we want enough data, right? We want data to tell us a story as to was this a success or do we have more work to do and where should we focus? And 4 weeks generally is going to be enough time to have a good read on what Google thinks of the new site or any search engine.
Okay. All right. So this is fun story time and pitfall time. So I'm going to pause here and answer some of the bigger questions. And then Richard and I are just going to story tell. If it was later in the day, we'd probably be drinking while we do this. These are all big things that we've seen through launches and things to just remember and to avoid. Okay. So, but let's answer some of these big questions. Okay. All right. So question one, you've had a website for multiple years and you do plan to redesign and relaunch it. And then you were like, hey, we got to implement SEO best practices before launching, or it's harder to do. So are we totally screwed? So we have let's call it, we have version 1 of the website. We're already thinking about version 2. We did not build SEO into version 1. Are we screwed, Richard?
No. Simple answer. No, you're not screwed. Because you're asking the question. It's never too late to consider SEO. And when you think of those best practices, it doesn't seem like you've launched yet. So there is still time. There's still time to take a look at it. And one of the things that happens with launches too is you have a really terrible site and you relaunch a really terrible site. Did you lose anything? I mean, if Google still sees that, well, you're still not doing page titles, you're still not doing meta descriptions. A lot of the times when we talk about taking advantage of SEO best practices or making sure they're implemented at this stage, is you will never get more attention from Google than when you relaunch a site. So it's a good opportunity not just to mitigate loss, but to offset potential loss. Let's say you get rid of 100 pages of content. It can be really helpful that you're doing more for the sake of SEO elsewhere across the site to help offset any potential losses that you see from, choices like that. But you're definitely not screwed. This isn't something where, you know, realistically, when you're thinking about a new website and you're thinking about those best practices, this isn't the full suite of everything you need to know about SEO needs to be done in the next week and a half as you think about launching the site. It's really checking these really important boxes as part of the process. But yeah, one, it sounds like you have some time. Two, even if you did launch the site without those best practices, again, there is that window, which I know one of the questions goes to, that you have to try to make those improvements. But ideally, you do it before Google sees the new site, because again, Google sees all this flashy new stuff. They want to crawl the whole thing and pay you a lot of attention to see what changed, make sure that they're sending users to the right spot. One of the notes here for Brandon is you don't actually, like, there's not a penalty per se. Really, what it is that, like with the example shown earlier of someone losing millions of dollars as part of the launch, like it feels like a penalty, right? But Google's not inherently saying you did something bad, and thus, we're not showing you anymore. It's, hey, you used to have this page about shoes and now you don't. So we're not going to show you for shoes, right? Or, hey, you used to have this page that talked about this, now you don't. Maybe you do, but you didn't tell them where you moved it. And so Google is really just sending you less traffic because it doesn't know what you're doing. It doesn't know what changed. It doesn't know where the content is. It's going to take time for it to find that content and give you credit for it. So that's what you're trying to mitigate. And the window immediately post launch is just the fact that you're getting a lot of attention from Google during this period of time. So you want to make sure that you're doing everything you possibly can to improve your presence during this process, because it's going to matter the most in that short period post launch.
Okay. And then really quick on this, we talked about there was kind of this question around you have some amount of time to fix this before Google doesn't care if you go back and try to fix it. Did you feel like you covered that one, Richard, or do you want to talk to that one a little bit more of like what's that window of time look like on, okay, fine, we're not going to be able to go back and fix these redirects at this point. It's not going to get us anywhere.
Yeah, redirects are going to be the thing that would be, if you were to quote unquote permanently lose, visibility, redirects would be the thing where that would show up the most. And that's really, think of it from the perspective of you move addresses, you wait a year and a half to tell the post office you moved, and then you ask where all your mail went, and if they can get it back to you, right? They're going to say no, right? It went to your old address. You didn't tell us you moved. So all of that mail's gone now. Someone else probably got it and committed a federal crime by throwing it away or something. That's the piece where realistically on redirects, you have a couple months before essentially there's this magical mythical value that pages have. And there's 1,000 metrics that go to the value of these pages. Redirects don't just point users to that new page, they also bring with it this value, this intrinsic value that Google's assigned to that page. And over time, as Google loses faith that that page still exists, it loses that value. So if you try to do redirects a year later and say, hey, sorry about that, we're here now, that value's gone because they haven't been able to trust that that content was there for a full year. So I would put redirects in that really a couple months. Some of the other things like page titles or updated H1 tags, it's not ideal to put those off until after launch, but that window is a little bit longer, especially if you haven't done any SEO ever before that. If you haven't done any sort of optimization prior to that, and then the window gets a little bit longer, right, as to the value. But redirects will be the thing where you can lose long-term value if they're not done really close to launch, as close as possible to launch.
Awesome. All right. So we're going to stay on as long as there's people here and questions. So we're going to keep going. I know people got to drop, which is totally fine. We will send the recording out, including all the questions. What we're going to do here, though, is we're going to run through the pitfalls. And then, Tina, you asked an awesome question about content and plagiarism. So we will stand on and talk about how to use AI the right way in your content and how to kind of keep expanding that site and expanding your traffic. And again, we're happy to we'll stay on and answer questions as long as you guys are on here. But to get this wrapped in the hour, at least get the core content through in the hour, we're going to pop through the pitfalls really quick. and we're gonna rapid fire, and then we'll stay on as long as there's questions. Okay. Okay. All right. So pitfall, let's just go back and forth. So I'll start with this one and then Richard, you get the next one. Okay. So pitfall number one, a lot of people think that, oh, shoot, we got the dev site and we're just going to go through and make some tweaks and it's ready to launch. 2 weeks is not enough time in your website dev line, timeline to go from a functioning dev site to the launch. You need more than 2 weeks. Our recommendation is at least 4, but it seems to be that most of dev firms default to 2. It's not enough time.
Yeah, modules and plugins come in. A lot of times it's because there's a specific need where, plugins can be great where you're not reinventing the wheel. Like Yoast SEO is a good example where you can put a lot of SEO elements into a site without a lot of extra bloat. When you get a lot of plugins and modules, you're essentially saying a third party built this tool. I'm just incorporating it into the site because I want to do one of the 7 things this thing is meant to do. What it can lead to is what we call code bloat. If a plugin promises to do 7 things, know that it's going to come with the code to do those 7 things, even if you're only using it for 1. And that just creates more stuff, more noise that Google has to crawl, more noise that the browser has to load for the end user that can impact performance. So a lot of
And more
times
security
plugins aren't
vulnerabilities.
necessary. Yeah, oh, for sure.
Okay. Don't index the dev site. Oh my gosh. I cannot tell you how many dev sites do this. You really want to make sure, even if they say that they're not indexing it, you want to double check that it's not indexed. I'd say half the time the dev team said that they weren't going to index it and they did it anyways. And on the other saying, don't no index your new site. So like when that new site goes live, you want that indexable. So you want to make sure both of those things are in place.
Yep. And then 301 redirects. So again, that change of address, it has to happen page by page. And it's very easy to kind of want to shortcut it, get a little bit lazy with it. I have 1,000 URLs. I'm just going to send everyone to the home page. I'm sending them to the site. They're not landing on an error page. That feels good enough. When we talk about that inherent value that Google gives pages, it gives that value based upon the content of that page. So you want to do apples to apples redirects whenever possible.
Okay, this is a really common one. Don't forget your tracking GA4, tracking scripts. Your dev team isn't generally going to be thinking about this, and this is a good one to have even in your scopes of your contracts. But make sure that like when that site launches, that all the things you use to measure all the things are on there. If you're using the pixel, like put the pixel on. If you've got GA4 and you're relying on it, make sure that's on there. Be like tag manager. So don't forget your tracking.
And then just making sure you hit those SEO basics. We have to camp out on that one. I think I already did camp out on that one.
Okay, and then this was a good one that Richard gave, which is it's easy to over rely. Like even if you run Sitebulb, if you run a tool like Sitebulb and you don't really know what you're looking at, it can be really, really hard to rely on that. So just don't, if you find a free or a really cheap crawling tool and you're not really sure what you're looking at, it's helpful to grab someone who does know what they're looking at to look at it with you. Don't over rely on like, oh, SEMrush said I have a 70%, so I am good to go. You really want to kind of know like a level down of what's going on.
And then using headers as design elements.
Oh
So
my God.
this happens a lot. Headers are, just like Word documents, right? You have a title of a Word doc, you have an H1 header, which is typically bigger, and then H2, H3, H4. Those are meant to organize content of a page. What often happens especially from design to development, is that those headers, I really like the way an H1 looks, so I'm going to make this call out for a newsletter an H1. But when you do that, you're essentially telling bots, Google, that there are 2 titles of that page. And one of them is newsletter now, right? Because we like the way it looked. You can make words look like headers without actually using the headers, but use headers just for organization of content.
Sorry, answering a quick question. Okay.
Yeah.
Please stop designing all your shit iframes, developers of the world. Cut it out. Without getting too technical, an iframe is a fancy way for designers to do things and make things look really fancy and pretty, but Google hates it and can't crawl it. So We don't want to see a bunch of those.
And then that clean, really simple navigation, it goes back to that Apple comparison. If I just want 3 links, like they can find the content elsewhere. The ease at which your content can be found by search engines and users will help you, not hurt you. Naturally, you can go too far with this. And you probably experience it where you go to a site and it's like a drop down of a drop down of a drop down to the point where it runs off the page. That's too much, but it has to be more than 3 links unless, you're also launching your new products to 1 million people on a live stream.
Yep.
Um,
So yeah, this is a great example for like that person who mentioned they're more of a services business, not a. This is one of the most common things we see from services businesses. They just want to have one page that just sort of captures everything that they do, and you just want to think that that's not how searchers want to find and interact with your content. It's certainly not how Google's going to index it. And when you make a navigation that looks like this, it's really hard to start expanding it back out. Okay, this is one that happens a lot. Everybody looks at their site on desktop like, oh, sweet. When I pull it up on my giant monitor, everything looks great. But the majority of your website traffic will be coming via mobile, and Google is mobile first in their indexing and ranking. So when you are evaluating a new website and a new experience and a new design, you really want to spend some time looking at how it looks on your phone, not just on a desktop.
And then XML sitemap and robots.txt. So these are the basic rules for crawling your site. And they're a little technical, but a sitemap is, hey, Google or Bing, here's every page I want you to know about. I just woke up my phone. A robots.txt is where I establish the rules for what I want Google to actually end up seeing, or any crawling tool for that matter. Where I don't want them to see login pages or password pages, or that would be where you set the basic ground rules for how bots should treat your website.
Okay. And then a few newer things. And then, Richard, I know that I scheduled this right on top of your next client call. So you tell me if you need to bounce because I can finish this out or hang on, whichever works for you.
Hear that? She's trying to get rid of me, guys. Trying to get rid of me. Yeah, I'm okay.
Okay. So one of the things that we're seeing a little bit more in design is Angular and headless CMS. And Richard, I'm gonna let you talk about this one because this is the one you really are talking about more than I am.
Yeah, so part of uh, website development is keeping up with the trendy thing, the thing that is popular right now, the thing that everyone's raving about, and that's Angular and headless CMS. To spare you the details, if you think of your source code, if you're on a website and you hit that Control U and it just screams at you and makes your eyes bleed, it is saying, let's take all of that code and put it anywhere else but on the website. So when you go to a site that's built in Angular and headless CMS, there's very little actual code that you can see when you do that. And the thought process is that I can put it somewhere else and just call on it. When the browser comes to the site, I can just call on it and say, I need that content. The content gets delivered, and it happens significantly faster than if it just tries to crawl the content on your website. So it's a new way to develop, newer way. It's been around for years, but definitely more popular now because Google cares so much about how fast your website is and the performance of your website. And as Natalie mentioned, more users are on mobile devices. So the amount of data they have to transfer and the speed at which they can load pages really matters. This is a way to make your site incredibly fast. Usually, I'll note, sometimes it doesn't work out quite how you
We
plan
found
it,
one
but
where it did it.
we did
Yay.
find one. But generally, this is just like the reason why you would use an iframe. You don't want to code something out. It's going to take forever to load. You're going to have it live somewhere else, and you're going to call on it and pull that information back. And it's just a way to build a site where even when you go to try to look for your analytics script, it lives somewhere else. It's not going to be in your actual source code when you go to look at it. So the big challenge here and that it poses is that you can't just go look at the code as easily, that you may have to go elsewhere, usually your CMS, where that content's hosted separately from the actual source code of your site.
All right. And then on Google Analytics 4, as I mentioned, I liked this GIF because that's how I feel like everybody feels about Analytics 4. Um, right now, which is we don't really know what we're doing. Like we're all just hanging in there. I say that like Richard and I are pretty adept now in analytics 4, but most of our clients are really struggling with this one because Google changed a lot. But the big basics here is one, use Google Tag Manager. Yes, Squarespace lets you put the Analytics 4 code right in there. Yes, you could do that too, and just use Google Tag Manager. And without getting really complicated with it, it's the only way you're going to be able to track meaningfully conversions. Um, and then most common thing that we see is that it gets put somewhere, but not on every page on the site. But great news, Tag Manager is going to tell you on the pages it's not on. So you can get a report and make sure it's on all the pages. And then you're almost certainly going to have to reset up key events. Um, I think Richard added tests in the dev environment if possible, because I don't remember putting that bullet point on there.
I did, yeah. So if you can put it in the development environment, one of the notes here is that, of course, if you leave it in your development environment as you're like QAing your site or multiple people are going to the site in the dev environment, it does track those sessions. But if you're able to test it in the development environment, it can help prevent issues at launch. You definitely want to look for it and make sure it's installed when you first launch the site, but to really prevent any loss of data, especially if that's something you're super concerned about, testing it in the development environment to make sure that if an event changed or your forms changed or your phone number changed on the click to call, being able to test it in the development environment, make sure that every tag or event or element you want to track on the site can be tracked at launch, and then you're not chasing it as much when the site goes live.
Okay. Oh, and this is a good segue into Tina's question on AI content. So great way that I heard from someone on AI that I've just now started stealing and saying my own is think of artificial intelligence as an army of interns, which is great. And like you could get your intern to do a lot, but you shouldn't let your intern do all the work. And you definitely shouldn't let your intern do anything that you don't review. So yes, you can use artificial intelligence to help think up what your navigation structure should be, what kind of content, even what the outline of the content should be. No, it is not a good idea to just let ChatGPT write your content. Um, and we can stay on and talk about that more in depth and the right way to use AI. That could be its own hour all in itself if people have questions on this. But in general, you do not want to let generative AI just write your content because one can make stuff up, but then two, Google can tell that it's AI, and it's going to be less inclined to index your content. And also, users can tell that it's AI, and they're going to be less inclined to do meaningful things with your content because they're going to read things like you're supercharging and accelerating everything, and they're going to be annoyed and they're not going to do anything. Because everyone's starting to be able to do that like generative AI sniff test. It's kind of easy to start reading and understanding when something's generative AI. Okay. So some tools, free tools. Oh, not all free. SEMrush does have like a free version, I think. But SEMrush is a great one for a simple crawl, tracking rankings. If you're really getting into SEO and you want a good SEO tool kind of plugged into your site, SEMrush is the one that we love. If you have a bigger site or you're a little bit more technically SEO inclined or you're coding your site yourself, so you are a technical superstar, Sitebulb is a great, more in-depth crawl tool. Interestingly enough, Sitebulb is cheaper than SEMrush. But it's a little bit more of an aggressive one. If you're using artificial intelligence to do some SEO stuff, like, oh, I want some help with metadata or things like that. There's a SEO GPT. We didn't make it. I just like it. It's called Brainwork. I think it's pretty straightforward and it's helpful in doing things like if you're trying to do a little bit of SEO work on your site. And then also don't forget about the free tools that Google includes, Google Tag Manager, Google Analytics 4, and Google Search Console. Google Search Console is probably the one that's most commonly missed, but it's the most helpful when you're going through a relaunch process. It's free to set up, but you do have to go through the setup process. It's ideal to get it set up before you go through a relaunch. And then Analytics 4, most people have an Analytics 4 account, but a lot of people have kind of skipped doing Tag Manager because it's intimidating. But you really do want to set up Analytics 4 via Tag Manager. You do not want to just have an Analytics 4 tracking code on the site. You really want to use Tag Manager because otherwise it's going to be very difficult to track things like conversions on the site. Okay. All right. And like I said, so that's the bulk of the content. We will send out recordings and slides afterwards, and we're going to hang out here as long as people have questions for us. Or I don't know, until our eyes start bleeding or we lose our voices. So, I mean, I guess there has had to be a limit. Like we can't do this till midnight, but we'll hang out here for a little bit more, answer some more SEO questions. And of course we accept all the compliments that you want to give. So, we're big suckers for the adulation of strangers. So feel free to also say nice things to us. We like that too. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Tina's question here on AI content and plagiarism, because that's a really big topic. And it's kind of an evolving one. So Richard, do you wanna go at bat here on talking about AI content and plagiarism?
Yeah, and unfortunately, they almost go hand in hand at this stage. I think there's almost an accidental plagiarism that happens with AI, not by you, but when you're thinking of the value of AI generate, if everyone produces content using AI, it's fundamentally going to be very similar content. Because these language models will think the same way. Plagiarism is a little bit more malicious, just in the intent of the word, that you're just grabbing it and taking it. There are some mechanisms in search that try to prevent that from happening, where they try to show the first site to publish specific content and not show sites that just boldly copy it. Um, as it pertains to that plagiarism. But I would say, as much as possible, to be competitive in the organic space, you have to be different and better than your competition. Just like any other marketing, any other approach that you're going to make for your business, you should really strive to be unique, and you should try to bring value that you don't see your competitors bringing. And that inherently will push you to say, yes, I need AI to help me with an outline. I need AI to help point me in the right direction. I have writer's block. I don't know what to say. AI is a great tool. But when you're turning the keys to the car over, whether it's through taking someone else's content or using AI to just completely generate brand new content and not adding your own flair to it, it will be exceedingly difficult for you to compete in those spaces without unique, and I don't want to say ideally written by humans, but to a certain point, yeah, that the human element is still what makes us different. And in the competitive space, it's what makes us better, right? So having that incorporated in the website is important, and not copying someone else's thoughts on their company, but leaning forward on how you feel about it is going to be the ideal approach.
I
But
agree.
yeah,
And if
as far
you
as who gets punished more, it's going to be plagiarism from a search perspective. But the AI is because they're not punishing AI content. They just don't know who's better because everyone has the same thing. So really struggling to succeed with AI content, whereas plagiarism is, you take content, they're just not going to show you if they find it.
Yep. And that was actually a really big case study. So CNET 2 years ago was using Jasper to write a bunch of content, and they just weren't fact checking it, and they weren't plagiarizing, checking it, and all that stuff. And if you even like use a third party tool to take a look, they just killed their organic rankings and placements because they were inadvertently plagiarizing content. So Jasper was basically plagiarizing content and publishing it on CNET's site, and it just like CNET was pirating everybody's content. And that really hurt their site and their rankings and their traffic. And it really was detrimental to that brand. So for sure, play like to Richard's point, they can go hand in hand. Like you could be inadvertently plagiarizing, but plagiarism is by far the bigger deal. There is a great tool that you can pay for that we really like called originality.ai. Here, I'll send it out in the chat. If you're concerned at all that someone's on your site and originality.ai that might be plagiarizing or using AI, it can detect both. So it's a helpful tool if you've got third-party writers or you read something, you're like, I don't know if this is passing the sniff test. That can be a really great tool to just evaluate quickly whether something was either used AI or was plagiarized or both. Okay. Alrighty. I'm looking and okay, I'm trolling back. There was a lot of chats. Thank you everybody for participating so much with us. I think that is all the questions. Did anybody have any more SEO questions for us? I'm just going back through to make sure we didn't miss anything. Oh, look at somebody thinks that we should host a podcast because we
Yeah,
have
I'm
great
convinced
voices
you
for
got someone to
radio.
say that, like just to reinforce the idea.
You've got a face for radio, Richard, I think is what they said.
Yeah, true. True.
Um, okay. All right, I'll also mention out. So there's an email up here. A lot of people are asking us for, so absolutely, if you have a more in-depth question or you really could just benefit from a one-off SEO consultation, that is absolutely something we can do. If you just want to send us an email, hello@v9digital.com. Um, we will get you taken care of. Yes, we can do one-off SEO consultations. We help businesses through this process all the time, small to large. We're used to small and small service-based businesses and local. We have a garage door company here in Denver, all the way up to some big, big companies with, I think our biggest site right now we're working on is 8 million URLs. And everything in between. So we're happy to chat, happy to be a resource and helpful. We love the Denver community. We love Startup Week, happy to help wherever we can. I'm just popping through. I think we got all the questions. So, and I'm not seeing any more pop in. So I think we're good. If you need us, please reach out. Thank you guys. You have been awesome. We really appreciate all the chats. Thanks for all the compliments. I think my favorite compliment was the compliment on the GIFs. And I think my favorite GIF, I'm really trying to think of like what my favorite one was, but I think it's this one. But thanks for the GIF compliment. I did work really hard to really match how I was feeling about the topic when I was building the slides. So, all right. Thank you guys so much. We had a great time. If you have any follow-up questions, let us know. We will send out an email. I would say today, but let's just be realistic by tomorrow with the slides and the recording. Otherwise, happy SEOing, everybody. I hope that all of your website launch dreams come true. Google doesn't sandbox your site, and that maybe, just maybe, you'll be the first person to get analytics 4 right on their new relaunch. Thanks, everyone.